Frank, thank you very much. And Frank said early, a few moments ago, that this evening was about recognitions and about some of the bad things that have happened around the world with the loss of freedom. But tonight we're going to hear about some good things, people that are still fighting and fighting every day and advancing the cause of freedom around the world. And it's my great privilege, and I mean that very sincerely, my privilege, to make this presentation tonight to Pat Leahy, Senator Pat Leahy, the senior senator from Vermont, a post that he has held for nearly 38 years. In that time, Senator Leahy has distinguished himself as a staunch defender of human rights all over the world and for all peoples, an ally for the less fortunate around the world, and in this country as well. He is a true humanitarian. In 1997, Senator Leahy wrote a provision that became known as the Leahy Law or the Leahy Rule, a provision in the annual Foreign Assistance Bill, and it's been there ever since, that prevents the United States government from supplying arms to foreign military units that have clearly committed human rights violations. It's one of those things that becomes a benchmark each year when the Foreign Assistance Bill is considered on the floor and when the administration has to consider about releasing funds under that legislation. Until that legislation was adopted, the United States government provided military aid to governments that were routinely abusing the human rights of their own citizens. With Senator Leahy's leadership, these practices have been changed, and some of this, I think, has been prevented. So it has certainly been a step in the right direction. Senator Leahy has been a leading voice in the U.S. Congress in support of a robust and a very consistent foreign assistance program, even during a climate of widespread budget cuts. He knows from experience, as do I, because we've served in the same position in the House and in the Senate. He knows from experience that our foreign policy efforts, that our national security is enhanced by strong, targeted foreign assistance programs. I had the privilege, when I was chairman for 6 years of the Foreign Assistance Committee in the House of Representatives, to have Pat Leahy as my counterpart on the Democratic side over in the Senate. And I can tell you, he was always an extraordinarily thoughtful member of the committee and either chairman or ranking member who always had the right kind of approach to things. And he made it possible for us to work in a bipartisan way to get bipartisan legislation passed. Senator Leahy has never been one to stay silent in the face of human rights abuses. After the Arab Spring Revolution in Egypt a year and a half ago, Senator Leahy, with great foresight, attached strong conditions dependent on democratic development to the $1.5 billion in assistance that the U.S. government provides annually to the Egyptian government. When the Egyptians raided and closed down the NGO offices that included that of Freedom House and NDI and IRI and some others, and they began prosecuting the American and the Egyptian staff that worked there, Pat Leahy spoke out forcefully against this action. When the Obama administration decided to waive the assistance conditions, it was Senator Leahy that once again raised his voice in support of democratic forces. Pat Leahy has been an outspoken individual when it comes to speaking out against the abuses committed against people who try to exercise their rights of protest and of civil disobedience. He has been outspoken when it comes to the activists in Bahrain and continues to draw attention to the ongoing U.S. relationship with the Bahrain military. So, ladies and gentlemen, pragmatist, idealist, there are few lawmakers who combine those two attributes with such grace and dignity and skill as Senator Pat Leahy, and it's my privilege to present the Leadership Award to the Senate's own Batman, Senator Pat Leahy. You need to get a picture taken here. sure it gets to you.
Please sit down. Thank you. Thank you. You know, get that be presented by a dear friend like Jim Colby means a great deal to me, and I should tell you that Frank Sesno and I really have known each other forever. He was 4 years old working at this radio station when he was interviewing me, but it worked out very, very well. And, Jim is part of what we call a Vermont Republican, the old style that actually wanted to get things done. And we worked together. Jim, you and I, we'd make agreements on the foreign aid bill and others, and we knew we could take each other's word. Tim Reeser, who's here with me and would work at that, knew that if we made an agreement, we would bring Democrats and Republicans together for the good of the country, which is really what we're supposed to do. We could trust each other. You may have noticed up here, if you look out, it's actually kind of a nice view. You see the light on the top of the Capitol. That means we're still in session. Now, being in session doesn't mean we're accomplishing anything, but we're having a great time doing it. And one of the reasons the Senate is in there, and I say this as an admirer of Freedom House, and I know this will never leak out of here, but I admire you, and it is such an honor to be here. And I should tell you just for a moment why we're still in session. We're doing this because we have an amendment on the floor to cut off all aid to any country that has publicly disagreed with us. Wow, that will really get people on our side. It means out goes aid to Egypt, Libya, Israel, most parts of Africa, anywhere where we might actually help build the kind of freedoms and the kind of a rule of law that everybody in this room agrees with, whether you're Republican or Democrat or whatever. It is the kind of knee-jerk reaction that we have got to get away from. And thank God Freedom House is here. And one of the reasons I stood up for you in the Egyptian crackdown is because we need people to stand up. We need people to say, we are committed to freedom. And if we suddenly say, if you disagree with us, we'll cut off any aid, any connection with you, what does that say about our commitment to freedom and freedom of speech? Now, I got to tell you, and I told Marcel, my wife, who had to go back home to Vermont because of a health problem involving one of our children, that how pleased I was and how humbled I was to be recognized at the same time as Mr. Alkawacha. And I met his daughter here. You know, this is an example of standing up for freedom. I can do it easily. I can stand on the Senate floor and speak about freedom and do it safely. He stood up, suffered torture, abuse, imprisonment, because he stood up for it. You know, we're concerned with what's happening in Bahrain today, but it's courageous people like Mr. Al-Kawacha, countries around the world, that we rededicate ourselves to this evening. But it's also what Freedom House has done for more than 70 years. Jim mentioned the Leahy Law, and others did. Now, when I wrote that, I had no idea what impact it would have, but I did know that we could no longer permit United States aid to foreign security forces, the abuse and murder innocent civilians. That's wrong. It contradicts everything that we stand for. And I am pleased that both Democratic and Republican administrations have supported it. It's not a Democratic or Republican idea. It's a Freedom House idea. It's an American idea. It's a human freedom idea. It is a human rights idea. And it doesn't make exceptions. It applies the same standard worldwide. A clear incentive for governments to hold abusive military and police officers accountable. I don't care whether Human Rights Act activists are in Egypt, Russia, China, or any other country. They're persecuted for defending rights that we Americans take for granted. We ought to stand up for them. We ought to stand up for them. We know what our rights are. If other countries are to succeed in any form of democracy, they have to be able to stand up for their rights. We have a responsibility to support them. You know, Freedom House reminds us the denial of basic freedoms is everyone's concern, wherever it occurs. Sometime in the next couple of days, I'll be back at my farmhouse in Vermont. I will drive down a dirt road, dead-end road. I will come into this house where my wife and I celebrated our honeymoon 50 years ago last month. I know that there are freedoms in Vermont. I know that my neighbor may disagree with me on some political things, but he and I will stand together in defending our freedoms. What you do, you defend those same freedoms worldwide. I salute you, and I can't tell you how honored I am to have this award. Thank you.